Like I said to you earlier, that recording will give you access to this video so you can watch this back at any point. Like I said, today's session, we're covering the file management or the document storage side of things in terms of Microsoft 365. Now, as we kind of go through today's session, hopefully you can see my slides okay. I'm just going to cover a couple of applications where you're probably using, or if you're not using at the moment, some of these applications that might be really useful for you to start using, because this is where you can start to share and save documents more securely. And I'm going to kind of go through that in today's session. So in terms of some of the applications that we're going to cover today in this session is we've got OneDrive, which is your own kind of personal document area. So that is an area where you can save your files into OneDrive and only you have access to those files unless you pick and choose to share files out of there. So see OneDrive as your own personal area, and this is all sitting within the cloud, if you like to call it the cloud. You've then got Microsoft Teams, which you're all obviously in today's meeting. Now, Microsoft Teams has an area where you can create teams and you can store files for your team members in that particular area. So if you as a team are working on a certain project, or if you've just got documents that you share between each other, you can put it into Teams and people can quickly access those documents and collaborate and communicate within there a little bit easier. You've also then got SharePoint, and SharePoint is ultimately the same thing as Teams, but SharePoint is an area where you can share documents with the wider organization. So it might be people that's not currently in your team, but you want to share it with the wider organization, or even if you want people externally to access some documents within there. So whether that be third party or maybe just other practices within the CCG, it's an area where you can share with lots of different people. So these three areas here are kind of where you can start to save and store your documents in terms of how you want to share and what you want to do within there. And this webinar today is going to take you through each application and give you a bit of an overview of what that looks like so that you get a better idea of what I mean when I'm talking about those applications. Now jump into the next slide. Like I said a minute ago, you'll notice as we go through the session today that Teams is kind of the front face of SharePoint. And what I mean, the best way to describe that is see Microsoft Teams as the front of shop. So let's say that it's a nice fancy shop and that's where you go and do all of your bits and bobs. But whatever you do in the front of shop obviously changes what happens in the warehouse in the back. And that is ultimately what SharePoint is, where SharePoint is the kind of warehouse in the back where it kind of saves all of your documents. It's kind of managing that area. And you have access to both of these areas depending on how you want to use those areas. Again, this is going to make more sense as we go through the session. Just trying to give you a bit of an idea of how these are all kind of linked together when we're talking about storage or documents, file management. In terms of accessing documents, once you've saved your documents into OneDrive or Teams or SharePoint, it doesn't necessarily mean you have to change the way you work. So ultimately, you may have already been using this. So the yellow folder on this PowerPoint slide is something that you might have been using for the last 10 or 15 years. And we call that a File Explorer. And in that yellow folder, you click into there to go and find your documents and you can work on your documents from there. That is still exactly the same thing that you can do even when you save your documents into OneDrive and SharePoint and Teams. And I'm going to show you that today as well in this session. You can also access your documents when you go to www.office.com. And when you go to office.com, as long as you're on the internet, you can access any of your documents from any particular device as long as you've got internet connection. So this is one of the benefits of moving or saving your documents in OneDrive, Teams, or SharePoint, because you can then access your documents from any device, whether that be your mobile phone, an iPad, or some sort of tablet, or even just a home computer. So you don't always have to rely on your work computer. As long as you've got internet connection, you can access them, those files, from anywhere. Now, the last kind of slide I've got here before we actually jump into the demonstration is just explaining, when we're sharing documents, how do these applications kind of link? Now, the best way, again, to describe this is OneDrive is your personal area, and you can pick and choose who you share documents with. Teams is the area where you can put documents in there to share with your team. SharePoint is to put documents in there where you can then share with a wider organization or externally. And Outlook is the delivery system for all of those things. So what I mean by that is we still use Outlook to share files from OneDrive, or if we're sharing a file or a document from Teams, Outlook will be the vessel. Let's just say that Outlook is Royal Mail in this case. It's what delivers things to the next place. And I'm going to show you today how to share from all of these different areas, or even just how they're kind of linked. And again, that will make more sense when we go through the demonstration. Now, if there's anything to pick up from today's session, what I want you to kind of think about here is the security around all of these. You might be thinking, well, why do I need to now save my documents in these areas? The benefit and the beauty of it is you can access those documents from any device, as long as you've got internet connection. But more importantly, there are so much more security around when you share these documents from these areas. And again, that will make more sense in today's session. You'll be pleased to know that's the end of my slideshow. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to now walk you through some of the applications in terms of when I'm talking about OneDrive and SharePoint and Teams, in terms of that kind of document storage. Now, as I mentioned earlier, to access any of your documents, let me just open this here. You need to go to the internet, and in the search bar or in the bar at the top, just go to www.office.com. And when you come into this area, it will ask you to sign in. And you will then need to sign in using your credentials here. And when you've signed in using your login details, so these are your work login details, you will find that you get this online applications that you have access to. And in here, you can see on the left-hand side, we've got a couple of applications that I can access from here. And I've also got an area where I can see my most recent documents that I've worked on, so I can quickly access them from there as well. Now, like I mentioned earlier, what we're going to look at quickly is just OneDrive. And to access OneDrive, you can either search in the search bar at the top here, and you can try and find OneDrive there, or you can click in the app launcher, which is in the top left-hand corner of this internet page, and that will open all of the applications that you have access to. And OneDrive and SharePoint all sit in these areas. And this is how you access your documents when you save documents into these areas. When I open up OneDrive, it will take me to a new page. And in this new page, I am looking at my files. So remember, this is your own personal area. This is where you can pick and choose and decide who has access to your documents. And again, I'm going to show you some of the security features of why you would put stuff in here rather than the old ways that you work. Now, on the left-hand side, you can see here that I'm currently in my file area. And you can see in my files, I've got lots of different documents in here. There's some folders and then some documents as well. I can also see when they were last modified, who was the last person to modify them, how big they are. And this one here is quite important in terms of sharing. Now, as you can see through the list here, quite a lot of them are private, which means nobody else has access to them. But any ones that I have got shared, that means that somebody else or other people have access to that document because I've shared it with somebody else. And what I can do from here, and this is one of the most important kind of benefits here of using these areas, is I can click into shared and see exactly who has access to this document. So you can see here for this example, Jody Knight is somebody that I shared that document with, and this is the person that has access to that document. So only me and Jody can see this document at the moment. Now, one of the benefits is I can completely stop sharing this with Jody if I feel like I no longer need to share that document with her. That's one of the key points here in terms of OneDrive and Teams and SharePoint is you can stop sharing documents at any point if you want to stop sharing them. If you save your documents the old way, so into your computer or into a network drive, you won't have any of that access. You won't have any option to stop sharing. So once you send it, it's sent, and then you've kind of lost control of it. You don't know where it's gone or who's accessing it. So in here, you can now see exactly who's got access, and you can stop sharing it at any point. So think about those scenarios perhaps where it might be some confidential data in there, or perhaps you've just accidentally shared something that you didn't want to share with somebody. You can quickly come into your OneDrive area. So go to office.com, open up OneDrive, and you can quickly come and stop sharing that document at any point, which will then stop them having access to that document. We call this managing access, and it's a really useful tool to stop and take control in terms of who's seeing those documents. Now, if I stop sharing this with Jody, what it does is it's telling me it's going to remove a link to that document. And when we are sharing documents from OneDrive or SharePoint or Teams, if we're sharing documents externally or even internally, what we're doing is we're sharing a link to documents. And that is the difference when you've got documents in these areas. So instead of sending a hard copy of documents, the idea now, excuse me, the idea now is to share a link to documents, because what we can do with a link is we can control who's got or who's accessing it, and we can also then control if people still need to have access to that link. If we send it as hard copies, we don't have any control once it's been sent. So bear that in mind in terms of that security benefit and that feature. So stopping this particular link working for Jody, I'll click stop sharing, and it now tells me that there is no sharing, nobody else has access apart from me. And I can click out of there, and you'll notice in a moment, this will change from shared to private. So if I give this a little refresh, and I'm back into this area here, so I think it was this test document, you'll see that that has now gone back to private. So it's for my eyes only, and I'm no longer sharing that document with Jody. So as well as seeing your documents in here and working on them, and even potentially seeing who's got access to them, I'm going to run through how to save documents into here and how or some other benefits within using these areas. Now, on the left hand side here, we've got files. You've also got a recent area where you can see your most recent documents that you've worked on. And when you're in your recent area, you can even filter through what you want to look at. So if it was a PDF document or if it was a PowerPoint document, I can click on one of these and it will just show me all the PowerPoints that I was recently working on. Or maybe it's the Excel ones and I could remove the PowerPoint. So you can start to filter through anything that you've recently worked on, even if it was a few months back or wherever it may be. You've even got a shared area over here on the left hand side. And when you have documents in these areas and you share from these areas, which I'm going to show you shortly, you actually have access to this area here where you can see any documents that have been shared with you. So if somebody sent me a document, I can see all of that here. and any documents that have been shared by me. So if I send documents out to other people, I can see the documents that I've sent out. Now, think of this in terms of a scenario where you send a email with an attachment, and then you're trying to find that attachment maybe in a few weeks or a few months' time. You're trying to look for that particular document that was attached to an email. Well, you no longer have to filter or go through your emails just to try and find those documents. If you share it this way, these will all populate in this area here for you to quickly navigate and access to. And even within here, where it says shared with you or shared by you, there is a filter option over here in the top right hand corner where I could then click on this particular icon here and I could filter this out. So I could say that actually I want to look for a document that was from Sylvia. It was an Excel document, and I could even type Sylvia's name down here at the bottom, and it will show me any particular documents that Sylvia has sent me as an example. So you can see here that Sylvia sent me 2 Excel documents. Maybe I want to see all of the Word documents that people have sent me. I can filter and quickly find within a couple of seconds documents that people have sent to me. So you no longer have to go through all of your emails just to try and find an attachment if you use these areas. Underneath that, you've also then got a recycle bin on the left hand side here. Your recycle bin is self-explanatory. If you delete a document, it will sit in the recycle bin here. There is a retention policy within here. So what I mean by that is the document will permanently delete itself after a certain amount of days, whether that be 30 days, 60 days or 90 days. Ask your IT team, they will be able to tell you how long a document will last in there. Okay, underneath this on the left hand side, you've got something called quick access, and this area or these areas here are your SharePoint sites, and we'll go into that in a little bit more detail before I start showing you how to share documents. Now, going back into my files here, I've got my lovely folders and my documents in here. Now, what I can do from here is if I click New, which is currently sitting at the top, I can create new folders, so I can organize myself in here if I wanted to, and I can even create new documents from these areas here if I wanted to. So if I wanted to create a new Word document, I could click on the Word document and it will open Microsoft Word for me. And in here, I could say, hello everyone, just as an example. So you could work on this document and then you could close that at any point. Now you'll notice I didn't go to File, Save As, and I didn't save any documents there. Again, another one of the benefits or the reason that happened was because when I create new documents from my OneDrive area, so when I create documents from here, it automatically saves into this area here. So I can see that this document, document 2, I think it was called, which I worked on a few seconds ago, is now sitting here. And if I click back into it, you'll see that that work hasn't been lost. That is another key benefit of putting documents in OneDrive, Teams or SharePoint. It is an auto save feature. You don't have to worry about losing your work. So if your computer crashes and closes down, it will automatically save. It will automatically look at the work that you've already done and you won't lose any of that work. And you can see when I'm typing stuff in here, it's saving in the top left hand corner up here. And I can even rename this document. So if I call this a demo document and I call it demo document 2, I can make some changes. I can add things into here and I can just close it down. And that demo document 2 will then be in this area for me to quickly access, and I can jump into that document at any point. So creating new files and documents is a quick way to store your documents in there. Now, next to that, you've got an option to upload documents. So if you've got documents in your computer or into your local network drives, you could potentially move them across into these areas. So if you want to upload a file or a folder, you could just go and find that and put it into your own personal OneDrive. You should all have access to your own personal OneDrive area. So you can upload files into there if you want to do that now. The next button across is this synchronize button. And I'm going to show you what this looks like when you press this button. So when I synchronize this button, you'll remember that I mentioned earlier that you don't have to change the way you work when you are opening File Explorer. So that's the yellow folder that we use. So if I open that up, I'm just going to drag this into there so you can see this okay. So I've clicked into my yellow folder, so I'm in my File Explorer. And you can see here on the left hand side, I've got all of my areas where I can access any documents. So I'll make this bigger so you can see it. So on the left hand side, you'll notice that I've got quick access. I've got an NHS area, and this is my SharePoint area. I've also got a OneDrive area, and that's what I just synchronized. So I've got my OneDrive area, so I can quickly access all of my documents from there. But what you're probably used to at this moment is maybe saving documents into your PC. So you might have documents that are just into your PC or laptop or computer, and you access documents from there. Or you might have it in a network area. And if you click into here, it would drop down or show you any network drives that you have access to. Now, OneDrive and SharePoint are kind of not to replace these areas, but they just, like I said earlier, have more security benefits around putting them into those areas rather than having them in your PC or in a network area. So just bear that in mind in terms of where you might put your documents in future. Now, if I click into my OneDrive area, you'll see here that I can see all of my documents that are currently sitting in here. Now, if I kind of minimize this out and put these next to each other, you should see that these look very similar, or it looks exactly the same as the documents that I've got in there. So on the left hand side, I'm in my OneDrive application, and this is what I've just currently been working on. On the right hand side, I'm in my File Explorer folder, and I'm accessing my OneDrive area. And you can see here that this is exactly the same in terms of those documents. Although they might look different, they are exactly the same. So if I wanted to work on that document that I literally just created, that demo document 2, that was currently sitting there on the right hand side, it's also currently sitting here on the left hand side as well. And that's how it connects. So you can still put documents in OneDrive and you can still access them from your File Explorer here just to go work on those documents. There's just more security features. So just bear that in mind. That is what that synchronize button does. When you press synchronize, it updates the folders so that it shows you the same folders that are in your File Explorer in your yellow folder. And that's what that button does there. Automate is something that I'm not going to cover in this particular webinar, but this is where you can automate any of your documents, whether that be an Excel document or PowerPoint. You can decide how things work and move things across as an automation of when it's completed. So if a document is completed or a survey has been sent out, you can automate it to them save in a particular area and maybe even send an email to let somebody know that that's been saved in that area as an example. But that's called Power Automate. Might be something you want to look at in the future. Okay, a couple of other features that I quickly want to show you in here before we kind of jump across and show you how this is connected into Teams and SharePoint. Now, any of these documents or folders that I've been working on, if I click on the document, you'll see that I get a lot of different options at the top here. I can open the document, I can share it, I can copy it, download it, delete it, rename it, etc. If I also click into the 3 dots here, next to that document and I get this drop-down list, this is the same list that's showing at the top. So it doesn't matter which way you access this, this is exactly the same in terms of what you can do, depending on what your preference is when you're using this. Now, some of the other features that you've got in here, I've shown you kind of managing the access, but I want to show you how to quickly share documents. Now, the easiest way to do that is select the document or folder that you want to share. And at the top, just click on share icon here. And what that does, remember I mentioned earlier that that sends a link rather than a hard copy. So I'm going to send a link to a particular person or people. And in here, I can pick and choose. So let me just show you that. I click on this area here where it says people you specify can view. If I click on that, I can decide who this link is going to work for. Now you'll notice that I cannot send this to anybody with a link, because that means people outside of my organization might have access to those documents. So in terms of privacy, governance, data protection, you can't share this out with anybody randomly unless you get permission to do so. But what you can do internally is you can send this to anybody with an NHS account. So people in the NHS with this link can use that link, or maybe you just want it to be a specific person. So maybe I don't want to send this to a group of people. Maybe I just want to send this to one person. That person might be somebody on this call. So let's just say Naomi, maybe that's you, and I want to share that document with you. Now, when I was talking earlier about some of the additional features in terms of security, because you're sending a link, you can pick and choose what somebody can do with that document. So as an example, do I want them to be able to edit the document? So maybe I'm going to collaborate on that with Naomi in this case. Or perhaps I only want Naomi to review my document. So she can put comments in the document, but can't make any changes. So she can let me know if she suggests something, but it's not going to change. Or maybe it's just going to be a view only document. So think again of those scenarios where you may be sending this out to third parties or whoever it may be. Maybe you just want them to view a document. You don't actually want to give them access to be able to change anything or edit your document. So you can pick and choose there. If you do that, you can also block a download. So if I say that somebody can only view my document, I can also say, well, I want to stop them from downloading it on their computer as well. So you can actually prevent them from saving that document into their own areas. Again, more security around sharing documents rather than maybe the old way that you've been doing that. Just click apply when you've done that, and you can then share that document out with somebody. So if I do want to share this with Naomi as an example, I can search for Naomi in my area here. Naomi, which one is it?
It's the second one down.
Second one
down.
No,
The third one down. Sorry, that was my old job.
It's fine. So there we go. So if I wanted to send it to Naomi, because because I've got an account within the NHS, I can search for people in the NHS here and quickly send that. If it was somebody externally, sorry, I'm clicking around here. If I wanted to send that to somebody outside of my organization, I would just need to copy and paste their email address into here. So if I wanted to send this to myself, which is my work account, I could potentially send that, but you'll notice it says your organization doesn't allow sharing with these people. So you might have to request permission to send those documents outside of your organization. Just rather than seeing that as a hindrance, see it as a data protection issue. It's just to make sure that you're not sharing any personal information or confidential information with random people. Now, once you've kind of picked that, you pick the people that you want to send it to, you can see here that I get two options. I can either send an Outlook email message to Naomi, or I can send a link in a chat area or whoever. Maybe I'll just send it to Naomi in a one-to-one chat. So you've got two options there. So if I say hi, please can you look at this? I'll be polite. So once I've got my kind of little message in here, I can click send, and that will then send an email, and Naomi will now get an email notification where she can then access this particular document, and she'll only be able to view the document because I've not given her access to actually edit the document. Now, in terms of what that looks like, let me just show you Outlook so that you can actually see what that email looks like that you receive. So that email that I just, or not that email, the link that I just sent to Naomi looks like this. So you can see here, or hopefully you can see this okay, that this link or this message has been sent out. So it's telling Naomi that Chris Dempsey has shared a file with you. I've got a little message in there. So it says, hi, please can you look at this? Here's the document. And Naomi can then open that document and work on that document. So I don't necessarily have to attach it in emails and, you know, attach it like we normally do. When I share documents from OneDrive or SharePoint, I can quickly just do it from these areas, and Outlook will do it for me in terms of the hard work. Okay, I just wanted you to see that so you can see what it actually looks like when you receive those kind of notifications or emails. Now, if I jump into that document, maybe Naomi's already in here, I don't know, but this is where you can then collaborate and work on documents at the same time. So because they're over the internet, you've shared a link, it's a live updated version of this document, and you can then see each other in that document. Now, because I only gave Naomi viewing permission, maybe she obviously can't view this document, but you would then see people in this document. It would show you here where my mouse currently is. It will let you know that people are in the document, and you would then be able to see them in those particular areas. So that is the quickest and easiest way to maybe collaborate and share a document with somebody when it's just maybe one or two people that you want to share that document with. And you'll also see here that I have got a shared area which I can click into, and I can see specifically that Naomi has that link and she can work on that document, and I can stop sharing it at any point. Okay. Now, in terms of Teams and SharePoint, we're just going to quickly show you what that looks like when you're in those areas. Now, before we kind of jump into there, I would just want to make you aware of, once you know how to use these areas, so I'm showing you OneDrive at the moment. Once you know that you've got a couple of options at the top here and you can click into your files and documents, it looks exactly the same in Microsoft Teams, and it also looks exactly the same in SharePoint. So first of all, let me open up Microsoft Teams so that you can see a file area in Teams. So you'll notice on the left-hand side, I've got a Teams area that I'm a part of, and I'm going to be part of this training demo area, which I can click into. So if I want to go into the general channel in here and look at the files, I can access any of the documents in here. Let me unpin this so that it looks familiar. So you can see here when I'm in Teams that it looks quite the same as OneDrive. So if I kind of put it side by side, you'll be able to see this okay. It's not the one I wanted. There we go. So you'll notice that at the top, it looks very similar. And I'm just jumping around different screens now, so bear with me. And like I said to you earlier, it starts to become quite easy to use once you've got your kind of head around using it in one area. So like I just showed you a minute ago, you've got a new area where you can create new folders. Remember, from here, if you create Word documents, PowerPoints, Excels, whatever it is in here, it will automatically save into this area that you're currently in Teams. So it will save into this area for you if you quickly create documents from here. You can also upload documents into your Teams areas from here if you wanted to do that in terms of files and folders. And you can even see that you can share documents from this area. You can get a link You can synchronize this to show in your File Explorer. You can download documents, and you can even see that you can open this in OneDrive and open it in SharePoint if you wanted to as well. So in terms of that file storage and structure, when you put documents in Teams, it looks very similar in terms of how you use these documents. Just remember, in Teams, whoever is a part of your team will have access to these documents. Whereas OneDrive, you can pick and choose who's got access to your documents, but they're mainly just yours. Now, remember when I was telling you that Teams is ultimately the front face of the shop and SharePoint is the warehouse in the back. And if I want to access SharePoint, I'm going to go back to the office.com homepage. And if I open up the app launcher, and now I'm going to open up SharePoint, you'll see that I get a new page is created. And you'll notice that one of my frequent SharePoint sites is the training demo site that I am a part of. Now you'll notice that when I go into Teams, let me minimize this so you can see it. When I'm in Teams, you'll notice that I've got that training demo site here. So that training demo is the same as this training demo. Can you all still see my screen okay?
Yes. Yeah,
Yes.
I can.
Perfect, just double checking. So in terms of here, I can then access any of these areas. And if I click into the training demo, you'll see that I've got all of these different channels in here. So there's lots of different channels that I can access. And if I click into my SharePoint site, although this might look a little bit fancy, and I'll explain this in a little bit more detail. If I go to the document area on the left-hand side, you'll see that I can see all of the channel all sitting in here. So Teams and SharePoint is ultimately kind of synchronized. So I've got a general channel, I've got a blue channel, I've got a document sharing channel. You can see that I can access those files from this SharePoint area if I wanted to do that. Now you might be sitting here thinking, well, why would I use two areas? What's the point in having both of the same thing? Remember when I said earlier that when you put stuff in Teams, that's just for your team area. It's just for the people that are part of your team. Now from SharePoint, when you go into SharePoint, you might want to extend some of these documents to the wider organization. So maybe instead of these documents in the general channel, maybe I want to share this clinical data, or maybe I wouldn't share that. Maybe I just want to share some trust documents and I want to make that accessible to the rest of the organization. This is where I could come and do that and make it share. And you can see here, I can then pick and choose specifically, maybe everybody in the NHS can use that, and you can change the permissions on that particular area. So just wanted to show you that kind of connection in terms of OneDrive, Teams, SharePoint. They all look very similar. So you can see that I can create new folders, create documents, etc. from here. Just wherever you create them, they will then start in this particular area. You can upload stuff straight into here. The only difference between SharePoint and OneDrive at this point is you've got 4 people in this example who also have access to these documents. So in terms of working and, you know, going forward, kind of modernizing the way that you share and work with documents, perhaps this demo document that I've shared, maybe I want to move this. So I've just clicked on move to, and maybe I want to, rather than this being in my personal area, which me and Naomi can work on, maybe I want to put it in the SharePoint area where 4 or 5 other people can also access it. So I could click into my training demo here. I'm going to put it in my general channel. And then I'm going to move here. And you'll see that that document, it will tell me in the top right hand corner here, it will tell me that that document is being moved. And that document has now disappeared from my OneDrive area. And if I go back into my SharePoint area, you'll see that that demo document 2 will populate in here in a matter of seconds because I've moved that across. And the reason why I've moved it is because maybe it's a document that was maybe a draft, maybe it was a template that I was building out, and now I want to share it with the rest of the team. And I can just quickly put it into SharePoint or Teams so that other people can then access this particular document. So there you go. So demo document is now sitting within SharePoint here. The last couple of bits that I just want to mention in this particular webinar today. Now, SharePoint, yes, it replicates what you create in Team, but you can also have different SharePoint sites in here. So you might be part of multiple different SharePoint sites that you can go and access and obviously work in. So if I wanted to look at the Power BI workings in this particular team, what it does is when you click into a SharePoint site, you are taken to a home page. Now, a home page in SharePoint is like an intranet site. It means that it's like an internal website for your team, really, if you wanted to use it that way. And underneath that, you've got a documents area that you can click into. And this is where you can look at any of the documents for this particular SharePoint site or team site. And you can see here, I can even open this up in Teams if I wanted to, if I just want to go and access it from Teams. Now, the only reason why I would say you might need to go into SharePoint rather than Teams is because maybe you want to look at some of the more details around this. So maybe you want to manage the access of this document, or maybe you want to move a document to a different SharePoint site. That is why you would potentially need to come in these areas. Other than that, you might just use Teams to store your documents for your team members. So just bear that in mind. Now with SharePoint, it doesn't just have to be documents that you create or have created. You can create new document areas or document libraries, we call them, as well if you wanted to. So if I go on the home page of this SharePoint site and click new, you can see here that I can create a new document library. So rather than having this document structure, I'm going to call this some test documents. So maybe I want to create a separate area now. I could put a bit of a description in there if I wanted to, and then I could click create. And that test documents now sits in this kind of SharePoint site, which I can quickly access. Now, because I created this in SharePoint, it doesn't actually it doesn't do the same in Teams. So anything that I create in SharePoint doesn't replicate in Teams. But if I created that in Teams, it would replicate in SharePoint, which I know can be quite confusing for some of you. But this is just so that you can create separate areas for bigger teams or bigger organizations if you wanted to do that. So this test document, I could maybe then upload some files into here if I wanted to. Maybe I want to create new folders or files from here. If I wanted to see this in a Teams area, maybe I'll go to the channel and it'll then take me to that particular Teams area in there. Likewise, you've got all of the other different features that you can use, but I'm just showing you how to create those new kind of document areas or document libraries if you want multiple documents for your team. The final bit that I'm just going to kind of mention in this webinar today is if I go to Outlook and I go to create a new email, don't worry, obviously, if your emails look different to mine in this case, but if I wanted to attach any documents, I'll actually show you this in the Outlook application, so bear with me. If I open up Outlook on my computer and I want to create a new email and I want to send a document to one of my colleagues, or maybe even somebody externally, I could search for the person in here. So maybe I want to send this to Sylvia and I want to attach a file. Now, when I click attach file, you'll notice, or hopefully you can see this okay in this list, that some documents have a cloud icon and some documents do not have a cloud icon. And this is the difference between having documents in your OneDrive and SharePoint and Teams areas or having them saved into your computer or a network area. So remember earlier when I was talking about that left-hand side in File Explorer, if you've got documents in this PC or in the network, that means that you will send hard attachments. It means you'll send a document and then you lose control of it. If you save your documents in the SharePoint area or the OneDrive area, it means that you can send links rather than hard copies. And as I've just shown you in today's webinar, you can remove access of those at any point if you wanted to. You can easily share from those areas as well. And that is what is showing in this area here when you attach a file. Anything with a cloud icon means you can send a link. Any document that doesn't have a cloud icon means it's only a hard copy. So in this example, if I wanted to share this test document that's currently sat here, I could click on that and you'll notice that I don't get any options and it just attaches it as a hard copy. Now, several reasons why we want to move away from that is, first of all, once I send this to Sylvia, I've then lost control of that document. Sylvia can then share that with anybody else. Sylvia might download it into her own computer. She might edit some of that document. I would never know what Sylvia is doing with the document. Secondly, you're sending a document, so it actually takes quite a while to send big files. So if you're sending a folder with lots of documents in it and it's all on your computer, you've got to think that that's trying to get across to somebody else's computer. So sometimes it takes a while to send data. When we're doing that as a link, because it's an internet link, it's literally just a clickable link. It takes a second. So you could share the biggest folder you ever have. As long as you're sharing a link to it, you're not actually sending anything. So again, it's going to save you a massive amount of time if you're sending big files as well. Okay, so you've seen that I don't get any options, and when I click in this drop down list, I don't get any options in there. Now see how this is different when I open a document that is in the cloud area. So anything with a cloud icon, you'll notice that I instantly get an option of how I want to share that. So first of all, do I want to share a link or do I want to share a copy of that document? I would recommend that you share a link so that you can then control that document. Another benefit of sharing links and doing things in OneDrive and Teams and SharePoint is when you are sharing files, you only need to send the file once. And what I mean by that is if I sent this test document that I've got over here to Sylvia and Sylvia makes some changes, Sylvia would then have to reattach that document and then send it back to me. And then I would make my changes and then I would send it back to her. And you're kind of sending this document back and forth. When you share a link, because it's a live version, so you can see all the latest changes, you can respond in real time, you can collaborate on that document at exactly the same time, it's always updated. You don't have to keep sending it back and forth. So when I open the link and Sylvia's perhaps made some changes, I'll see all of the changes that she's made and it will tell me the changes that she's made as well. Then I could make mine and then Sylvia would also then see my changes. So you don't have to keep sending documents back and forth, which is quite nice. So when I click share a link, you'll notice that that is still kind of looks like an attachment, but it's got the cloud icon and I know that this is actually a link to the document. I'm not actually sending them the document. Whereas this one here, this is actually sending the document and then I lose control of it. Dropping down this list here, you'll notice that I can also change the permissions just from this menu here alone if I wanted to do that. So if I wanted Sylvia to only to be able to view this document, I could select view, or maybe I want her to edit the document. So you can change permissions from there. You'll notice when you send a document from those. Hard areas, you don't even get an option of what that person can do. You kind of lose control of that. So when you are attaching files, whether you still want to do it from Outlook, or if you want to go into OneDrive and SharePoint and do it, or Teams and do it from those areas, make sure that they have cloud icons. Well, they will have cloud icons if they are in OneDrive, SharePoint, or Teams. If you do then want to move documents that don't have a cloud icon, go to your File Explorer, so the yellow folder, find the documents that are currently sat in your PC or in your network drive and move them across to OneDrive or SharePoint. My final point in today's session would be, if you've got anything in your PC, I would say move that across to your OneDrive because it's your personal stuff. If you've got stuff in a network drive, that's the kind of stuff that should be in SharePoint or in Teams so that other people have shared access to it so that they also can access those documents as well. And that today hopefully gives you a bit of an insight of that kind of document storage or that file management and storage, and giving you some idea of the security around that. Karen, you've got a question. I'm going to stop the recording so that we don't pick up any of those questions in there, but that's all I'm kind of covering into today's demo. So I'm just going to stop the recording and then I'll answer your questions.